You may notice something strange when you begin looking closely at people who naturally build systems, structures, or long term realities. Many of them do not actually struggle with vision, they struggle with environment. Their minds move toward pattern before most people even realize a pattern exists, which means they often spend years trying to explain perceptions that others have not emotionally reached yet. This creates a quiet form of loneliness that does not always look dramatic from the outside, because the person may still function normally while feeling internally disconnected from the pace of the world around them. Most people assume loneliness comes from isolation, rejection, or a lack of social connection, but builders often experience a different kind of separation entirely. They can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen because the thing they naturally perceive is structural rather than emotional. They notice how systems repeat. They notice where conversations loop without resolution. They notice how entire groups recreate the same outcomes while believing they are making new decisions. Over time, this creates exhaustion because constantly seeing unfinished patterns changes the way reality feels. This is why many builders become quiet long before they become wise. Silence is often not withdrawal, it is conservation. They learn that speaking too early creates friction instead of movement because most people respond to immediate emotional reality while builders respond to long range consequence. You may notice this in your own life if you have ever tried explaining a future outcome that eventually happened while people treated your concern as negativity before the pattern became visible to them. Earth itself intensifies this feeling because human systems reward reaction more than foresight. The culture moves through urgency, distraction, and emotional immediacy, while builder oriented people naturally think in layers and timelines. This creates a strange tension where the person begins questioning themselves simply because their rhythm does not match the dominant rhythm surrounding them. Eventually, they start wondering whether something is wrong with their perception when the deeper issue is often incompatibility between long range awareness and short term environments. You can see this clearly in workplaces where structural thinkers become emotionally drained even when they are technically successful. The exhaustion does not come only from labor. It comes from repeatedly watching preventable problems unfold because nobody wants to slow down long enough to address the deeper mechanism producing them. The builder sees the instability early, but early perception rarely receives appreciation in systems addicted to urgency. By the time everyone else finally recognizes the problem, the builder has usually been carrying the psychological weight of it for months or years. This is also why many builders become obsessed with improvement at a young age. They intuitively feel that systems can evolve, which means stagnation begins feeling psychologically painful rather than merely inconvenient. What others tolerate, they experience as friction against movement itself. A poorly designed environment does not simply annoy them, it drains them. A dishonest relationship does not simply disappoint them. It destabilizes their internal orientation because builders instinctively search for structural coherence in almost everything they touch. Many people misunderstand this and assume builders are perfectionists. Sometimes they are, but perfectionism is usually only the surface expression of something deeper. Beneath it exists a nervous system attempting to reduce instability. The builder does not only want things to look better, they want reality to function with less contradiction. They feel relief when systems align because coherence creates psychological spaciousness. Disorder forces them to continuously spend energy compensating for weaknesses they can already see forming. You may have noticed that some builders seem unusually sensitive to wasted potential. This sensitivity is not random. They often perceive possibility and consequence simultaneously, which creates internal tension when reality moves beneath what it could become. Other people may look at a situation and see what currently exists. The builder often sees what exists, what is forming, and what will collapse if nothing changes. Carrying all three perspectives at once creates a type of mental weight that becomes difficult to explain to people living only inside the present layer. This becomes even more complicated in relationships because builders frequently try to construct stability for others before establishing stability within themselves. They become problem solvers, planners, protectors, and emotional infrastructure for entire groups while privately feeling unsupported. The tragedy is that many people grow dependent on the builder's capacity without understanding the cost required to maintain it. Eventually, the builder begins feeling less like a human being and more like a structural utility existing to prevent collapse in other people's lives. Over time, this creates a dangerous psychological split. The person becomes highly capable externally while internally questioning whether they are actually loved beyond their usefulness. They may start wondering why connection feels conditional, even inside relationships that appear successful from the outside. This is where many builders begin mistaking exhaustion for identity. They become so accustomed to carrying systems that they no longer remember what life feels like without responsibility fused into their sense of worth. The deeper lesson hidden inside this pattern is that many builders unconsciously attempt to earn belonging through construction. They build value because value feels safer than vulnerability. They create stability because stability feels easier than emotional exposure. But eventually, they encounter a painful realization. No amount of external structure can fully resolve an internal fear of displacement. The more they try to guarantee belonging through usefulness, the more their nervous system associates rest with danger. This is one reason Earth can feel unusually slow for certain people. The frustration is not only cultural, it is existential. Builders often carry an internal momentum that exceeds the pace of collective adaptation around them. They think quickly, connect patterns rapidly, and emotionally process future consequences before external reality visibly changes. Living inside slower systems while perceiving faster implications creates a constant sensation of waiting for reality to catch up to what already feels obvious internally. At first, this can produce arrogance if the person lacks maturity. They may begin believing they are simply more aware than everyone around them. But eventually, life corrects this perception because awareness without integration becomes distortion. The deeper truth is not that builders are superior, it is that they are configured differently. Their lesson is not learning how to dominate slower systems. Their lesson is learning how to remain connected to humanity without resenting its developmental pace. This changes the way loneliness is understood. The builder's loneliness is often not solved by finding identical people. It begins healing when they stop treating difference as exile. Many builders unconsciously believe they must either shrink themselves to belong or isolate themselves to remain authentic. Neither approach creates real integration. One produces self abandonment, the other produces emotional distance disguised as independence. The real movement begins when they learn how to translate perception without demanding immediate recognition. You may notice something important once this shift begins happening. The builder becomes calmer without becoming smaller. They stop trying to force realization into people who are not ready to hold it. They stop interpreting delayed understanding as proof of failure. Instead, they begin recognizing that timing itself is part of structural intelligence. Not every truth becomes useful the moment it is perceived. Some truths require emotional conditions before they can stabilize inside another human being without creating defensive resistance. This is where the idea of being out of place starts transforming into something more useful. The feeling was never only about geography, society, or incarnation. It was also about orientation. Builders often search for environments that already mirror their internal rhythm instead of learning how to create coherence within imperfect systems. But once they stop waiting for perfect alignment, they begin discovering that their real function may involve helping transitional environments evolve rather than escaping them entirely. That realization changes how suffering itself is interpreted. The difficult environments were not always meaningless obstacles. Sometimes they were developmental pressure chambers forcing the builder to refine discernment, patience, emotional regulation, and translation. Without those refinements, many builders would become consumed by frustration, superiority, or chronic alienation. The friction was not only punishment, it was calibration. The environment slowed them down long enough to deepen them before giving them greater structural influence. You can often tell when a builder begins understanding this lesson because their relationship with pace changes. They still feel urgency internally, but they no longer panic when transformation unfolds slowly. They stop measuring intelligence only through speed. They begin seeing that stable structures usually require gradual integration rather than rapid expansion. This creates a very different emotional atmosphere around them. Instead of radiating pressure constantly, they begin radiating orientation, which quietly changes the people around them without force. At that point, the builder starts recognizing something most people never notice. Human beings do not resist truth only because they are unconscious. Many resist because rapid transformation threatens the identities keeping their current psychological structure intact. Once this becomes visible, compassion starts replacing irritation. The builder realizes that forcing realization too quickly can destabilize people who still require the very structures the builder already outgrew internally. That understanding changes how teaching, leadership, and influence are approached. This also reveals why certain people repeatedly feel drawn toward larger questions about reality, consciousness, and meaning, even when they try living ordinary lives. Something inside them keeps searching for the deeper architecture beneath visible experience. They cannot fully silence that instinct because it is tied to how they naturally orient toward existence itself. Even when they attempt distraction, entertainment, or conformity, the underlying pattern recognition eventually returns and asks the same quiet question again. What kind of structure is this life actually building inside me? Once that question begins stabilizing, the entire idea of being out of place starts evolving into a different realization altogether. The builder may not have come here merely to find comfort inside existing structures. They may have come here to understand what kinds of structures produce fragmentation, what kinds produce coherence, and why human beings repeatedly confuse control with stability. That changes loneliness from evidence of failure into part of a longer educational process whose implications continue expanding the more honestly it is examined. The oversold lesson inside this feeling is not simply that Earth is difficult. That would be too easy, and it would leave the builder with the same sense of separation that created the pain in the first place. The deeper lesson is that a builder must learn the difference between being misplaced and being placed inside friction. Misplacement makes the soul believe it is in the wrong world. Friction asks the soul to discover what kind of intelligence can only mature when it cannot immediately control the environment around it. This is where many builders misunderstand their own discomfort. They think the pain means they should leave, detach, transcend, or withdraw from the human field entirely. Sometimes withdrawal is necessary for restoration, but withdrawal cannot become a permanent philosophy. If the builder only seeks spaces where everyone already understands, then the builder never develops translation. And without translation, even the clearest structure remains locked inside the one who can see it. Translation is one of the most important lessons for builders on Earth. A builder may perceive a pattern instantly, but perception is not the same as communication. People do not usually change because someone presented the correct structure. They change when the structure becomes emotionally accessible enough for them to recognize themselves inside it. This means the builder must learn how to slow a truth down without weakening it, how to speak from the future without making the present feel condemned, and how to offer direction without turning awareness into pressure. You can see this in the way some builders speak before they have learned timing. They may be accurate, but their accuracy lands like force. They may see the flaw, the consequence, the hidden pattern, the likely outcome, yet the person receiving it only feels judged or rushed. The builder then feels misunderstood and retreats deeper into the belief that Earth cannot hear them. But often, Earth is not refusing the message. It is refusing the way the message arrived before trust, readiness, or shared language had been built. This is a difficult lesson because builders usually want to move from insight to correction quickly. When you see the broken beam, you want to repair it. When you see the repeating pattern, you want to interrupt it. When you sense the future consequence, you want to prevent it before pain becomes necessary. But human beings do not always learn through prevention. Many learn only after experience creates enough internal evidence for the truth to become personal. That does not mean the builder should become passive. It means they must learn the difference between intervention and preparation. Intervention tries to stop the outcome directly. Preparation creates conditions where the truth can be recognized when the moment arrives. A mature builder does not always rush to fix the visible issue. Sometimes they build language, trust, context, and emotional readiness so that when the pattern becomes undeniable, a new structure can actually be received. This changes how loneliness is carried. The builder no longer sees solitude only as evidence that others cannot understand. Solitude becomes a workshop where perception is refined before it is offered. The time spent alone is not always exile. Sometimes it is where the builder learns to remove ego from accuracy, urgency from insight, and resentment from vision. Without that refinement, even a true perception can become distorted by the pain of not being recognized. The feeling that Earth is too slow also begins to change when the builder understands developmental pacing. Slow does not always mean asleep. Sometimes slow means embodied. A truth can be understood mentally in one moment and take years to reorganize a life. This is why some people seem to know better while continuing the same pattern. Their mind has received the information, but their body, relationships, habits, and identity have not yet built the structure needed to live it. Builders can become impatient here because they often assume that seeing a pattern should be enough to change it. But most human change requires more than recognition. It requires safety, repetition, practice, grief, boundary shifts, and the dismantling of secondary benefits attached to the old structure. A person may hate a pattern and still depend on it for belonging, income, identity, or emotional familiarity. Once the builder sees this, compassion becomes more precise. It stops being vague kindness and becomes an understanding of the actual architecture holding people in place. This is the point where the architect's dilemma becomes clearer. The builder feels out of place because they often perceive the design before the surrounding environment has enough capacity to embody it. They are not wrong to feel the distance, but they can be wrong about what the distance means. It does not always mean they are above the environment, beyond it, or finished with it. Sometimes it means they are being trained to build bridges between levels of readiness. This is also why the ladder versus spiral distinction matters, even before it is named fully. The ladder mindset makes the builder think in higher and lower, ahead and behind, awakened and asleep. That language can feel satisfying when the builder is lonely because it explains the distance in a way that protects self worth. But it also creates separation. It tempts the builder to turn developmental difference into hierarchy, and hierarchy often becomes the hidden beginning of contempt. The spiral view offers something more mature. It shows that growth does not always move upward in a straight line. People circle through lessons, revisit old thresholds, deepen through repetition, and return to patterns with slightly more awareness each time. From the builder's perspective, this can look inefficient, but from the soul perspective, repetition can be how embodiment forms. A truth that is only touched once may inspire someone, but a truth returned over time can become a structure inside them. When builders understand this, they stop treating repeated lessons as proof that nothing is changing. They begin noticing smaller signs of development. A person pauses before repeating the old reaction. A relationship names the pattern earlier than it did before. A system fails more visibly, which means denial is weakening. These may not look like major breakthroughs, but they reveal that consciousness is beginning to create internal space where no space existed before. This does not remove the builder's frustration completely. It gives the frustration a wiser container. The builder can still feel the ache of seeing what could be built faster, cleaner, and with less suffering. But that ache no longer has to become resentment. It can become devotion to pacing, to translation, to building structures that do not collapse because they were erected faster than the field could hold. The builder begins learning that speed without integration often creates another future repair project. A practical way to identify the oversoul lesson is to look at the specific form of discomfort that keeps repeating. If the builder always feels unseen, the lesson may involve translation and visibility without overexposure. If they always feel used, the lesson may involve boundaries around their stabilizing power. If they always feel surrounded by slow people, the lesson may involve patience without superiority. The repeated frustration is rarely random. It points toward the exact inner structure the soul is being asked to refine. This is why Earth becomes such a powerful classroom for builders. It does not simply give them ideal materials. It gives them contradiction, resistance, delay, and emotional complexity. These are frustrating materials, but they are also real materials. Any structure that can only function in perfect conditions has not yet proven its strength. Earth teaches builders how to create coherence inside density, not because density is superior, but because density reveals whether a structure is truly embodied. You may notice that builders who mature through this process become less dramatic about not belonging. They still feel different, but the difference no longer requires constant defense. They stop needing others to confirm the validity of their perception before they act with integrity. They also stop using difference as a reason to avoid intimacy. Their presence becomes steadier because they are no longer demanding that the world mirror them before they contribute to it. This steadiness is the beginning of real service, but not service in the self abandoning sense. It is service as accurate placement. The builder learns where their energy belongs, where it does not, where a system is ready for support, and where support would only enable avoidance. They stop trying to build everywhere. They become selective without becoming cold. That selectivity is one of the signs that the builder's relationship with Earth is becoming cleaner. At this stage, the feeling of being out of place begins turning into a more refined question. Instead of asking why they are here, the builder starts asking what kind of relationship with this world would allow their perception to become useful without becoming consumed. That question matters because usefulness without self-possession becomes another trap. A builder can spend a lifetime repairing systems that never mature, helping people who never take responsibility, and stabilizing environments that drain the very intelligence they claim to value. The oversoul lesson often involves learning that placement is not the same as comfort. You can be correctly placed and still uncomfortable because the environment is asking something undeveloped within you to strengthen. You can also be incorrectly placed and feel needed because the environment benefits from your overfunctioning. This is why builders must learn to read the difference between sacred friction and extractive friction. One refines you, the other consumes you. Sacred friction leaves you clearer over time, even if it challenges you. Extractive friction leaves you smaller, more resentful, and increasingly disconnected from your own center. Sacred friction asks you to grow capacity. Extractive friction asks you to compensate for what others refuse to face. Once a builder understands this distinction, they begin making better decisions about where to stay, where to build, and where to withdraw without guilt. This is where the builder's loneliness can finally become intelligent. It stops being only a wound and becomes a signal. Sometimes loneliness tells you that you need deeper connection. Sometimes it tells you that you have been offering your deepest perception in rooms that are not built to receive it. Sometimes it tells you that you have confused being useful with being met. Each version requires a different response, and learning that difference is part of the education. The builder who learns this no longer needs Earth to feel easy in order to belong here. They begin seeing that belonging may not mean being fully understood by every environment they enter. It may mean being rooted enough in their own design that they can participate without dissolving, observe without withdrawing, and build without demanding immediate recognition. That is a much deeper belonging than social comfort. It is belonging through function, clarity, and self possession. And once this begins, the original ache changes shape again. The question is no longer only why Earth feels too slow, or why the builder feels alone, or why the world seems so resistant to coherence. The question becomes more direct and more useful. What is this slowness teaching me to build within myself before I try to build anything outside of myself? That question opens the next layer, because the builder's real work may begin not with the world that frustrated them, but with the inner structure that frustration has been revealing all along. The deeper structure beneath this entire dilemma is that builders often confuse belonging with environmental agreement. They think they will belong when the people around them finally move at the same pace, see the same patterns, respect the same consequences, and understand the same pressures. That kind of belonging may feel satisfying when it happens, but it is not strong enough to carry a life. If belonging depends on being mirrored perfectly, then every slower room becomes exile, every misunderstanding becomes rejection, and every delay becomes proof that the builder should not be here. A more mature kind of belonging begins when the builder stops outsourcing placement to the environment. This does not mean pretending every environment is healthy or forcing themselves into spaces that drain their life. It means recognizing that their inner orientation must become stable enough that external mismatch does not immediately collapse identity. The builder must learn how to stand inside difference without turning difference into abandonment. That is where the inner architecture begins to matter more than the outer room. This is the hidden reason Earth can feel so severe for builders. It does not allow them to remain only in concept. It asks them to embody what they claim to know while surrounded by contradiction, delay, confusion, and emotional weather. It is one thing to see a pattern from above. It is another thing to stay kind when the pattern moves slowly, to stay patient when correction is rejected, and to stay clear when others mistake your foresight for criticism. Earth forces the builder to discover whether their vision can survive contact with human timing. This is also where the architect inside the builder meets its own humility. A person may carry a strong blueprint, but a blueprint is not the same as a living system. Living systems resist, adapt, misinterpret, evolve, and sometimes refuse what would help them because they are still attached to what is familiar. The builder must learn that a design is not complete until it can meet the actual conditions of the field. If the plan only works when everyone understands immediately, it is not yet a structure. It is still an ideal. This changes the meaning of frustration. Frustration is not always a sign that something should be abandoned. Sometimes it is showing where the builder's design has not yet become relational enough to enter the world. The person may have the right insight but the wrong pacing, the right perception but the wrong language, the right concern but the wrong moment. When this is understood, frustration becomes less like a wall and more like a diagnostic instrument revealing where translation still needs to mature. You may notice this in your own history if you have repeatedly felt ahead of people while also feeling unable to reach them. That gap can become painful enough to make you retreat into silence, sarcasm, superiority, or private world building. But the gap itself is not the enemy. The gap is where teaching, leadership, art, structure, and service are born. The builder who learns how to cross that gap without diluting truth becomes a bridge instead of merely a witness. A bridge is different from a ladder. A ladder implies that one person is higher and another is lower. One is advanced and another is behind. That image can be seductive to builders who feel exhausted by the slowness of others because it gives their frustration a spiritual explanation. But the ladder also isolates the one who climbs. It turns difference into distance, and distance eventually becomes loneliness with better language. The spiral offers another way to understand the same experience. It shows that people may be meeting the same truth from different angles, depths, and timings, not simply from higher or lower positions. Some are circling a lesson through emotion, some through consequence, some through repetition, some through loss. The builder may perceive the structure earlier, but earlier does not always mean more complete. Sometimes those moving slowly are gathering forms of embodiment that quick perception alone cannot provide. This is a hard teaching because it asks the builder to respect processes that feel inefficient. It asks them to see that repetition can be sacred when it deepens capacity. It asks them to stop judging every return as regression. A person who revisits the same pattern with one more degree of honesty is not exactly where they were before. A relationship that names the same conflict with greater clarity is not repeating in the same way. A system that fails visibly may be closer to change than a system that still hides its fracture well. Once the builder begins seeing this, they stop equating speed with superiority. Speed has value, but speed without embodiment can become another form of escape. Many people who understand quickly do not change deeply because their insight outruns their nervous system, relationships, and habits. The builder must understand this in themselves too. They may be able to name a pattern before others, but naming is only the first layer. Living differently is the construction. This is why the oversoul lesson often begins inside the builder before it becomes useful outside them. They may want to redesign the world, the family, the workplace, the community, or the wider human field. But the first structure under examination is often their own relationship with time, patience, communication, and worth. If they cannot tolerate being misunderstood without losing center, then visibility will distort them. If they cannot wait without resentment, then leadership will harden them. If they cannot rest without guilt, then every structure they build would inherit their exhaustion. The builder must eventually ask what kind of life their inner architecture is producing. Are they building from clarity or from irritation? Are they serving coherence or trying to prove that they were right all along? Are they translating truth or weaponizing perception against slower rooms? These questions are not meant to shame the builder. They are meant to refine the intention behind the build, because even accurate insight can become distorted when it is delivered through unresolved loneliness. When this refinement begins, the builder's presence changes. They no longer need to announce every flaw the moment they see it. They no longer confuse silence with weakness or timing with avoidance. They learn that a structure can begin forming before anyone else names it. They become capable of planting ideas, shaping context, asking better questions, and letting people arrive without turning every delay into a personal wound. This is often when their influence becomes stronger, even though it may look quieter. People begin trusting them not only because they are intelligent, but because their intelligence no longer feels like pressure. Their clarity makes room instead of closing it. Their foresight guides without humiliating. Their stability teaches others that structure does not have to be domination. It can be a field where people become more honest because they no longer feel attacked by truth. This is the real answer to why builders feel out of place on Earth. They are not only encountering a world that moves differently from them, they are encountering the exact conditions that reveal whether their gift has become embodied enough to serve life. If the builder only knows how to operate where everything already makes sense, then their gift remains untested. But when they can create coherence inside delay, density, and misunderstanding, their function becomes far more than vision. It becomes grounded wisdom. That grounded wisdom does not erase loneliness, but it changes its quality. Loneliness becomes less about being separate and more about learning how to place the deepest parts of yourself wisely. Not everyone receives the same layer of you. Not every environment deserves your full architecture. Not every room is meant to become home. Discernment becomes the companion of compassion, because compassion without discernment turns the builder into a resource, while discernment without compassion turns the builder into an island. The builder then begins living from a more integrated rhythm. They still see what others miss, but they no longer need that perception to make them feel superior. They still feel the pain of wasted potential, but they no longer spend themselves trying to force readiness. They still sense the future shape of things, but they understand that futures must be walked into by beings with bodies, histories, fears, loyalties, and unfinished grief. This understanding does not weaken the builder, it makes the build more human. This is where the doorway opens into a larger teaching. The ladder says the builder is above what they have outgrown. The spiral says the builder is circling deeper into what they are here to embody. One view flattens the wound, the other matures the gift. And once that difference is felt, the builder can finally stop asking only why Earth feels so slow and begin asking what kind of builder they become when they no longer need the world to move at their speed before they choose to serve it.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Haret library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.